morning, everybody. Welcome to the yellow tea standing alone session. By the end of this session, you're going to continue to expand your knowledge on yellow tea. You'll have tasted a very interesting yellow tea. This yellow tea, by the way, is from Anhui province. And you'll hear a horror story. So, without further ado, let's begin. Let's start with a horror story because, you know, I find, and there were a number of customers this week that were talking about the state of movies that you go to at the movie theaters and lamenting how it's not as rich and fulfilling seemingly as it used to be. And yes, there are some streaming things. And so this morning I thought, you know what? Why don't I take a trip through the internet? And it turns out that's like a horror show. Now it's a bad horror show, but it is like a horror show. So one of the things that I started out with was looking at what it says on the internet about yellow tea. And you know what? Because I thought this could be fun. Let's ask AI what it thinks about yellow tea. And so this should actually be rated X. This is why I'm telling you, so that you don't go through this exercise because it hurts your eyes. And you get knowledge and information. You get knowledge. No, you don't. You get information that's fake information. So, for example, one of the leading sentences of the AI expert talked about yellow tea in the Tang Dynasty. I'm scratching my head and I'm thinking, God, my own research is so poor. Yellow tea in the Tang Dynasty? How come I've never come across that? That's one thing. I said, okay, let's get to a safer realm, a realm that won't be so horrifying as a historical realm. Let's do health benefits of yellow tea. And up comes this set of websites and long lists of alleged health benefits. The only problem, and by the way, if you thought that, and it's right for you to question when an understudy is doing this type of exploration, because maybe they're using the wrong search words, or maybe they're using bad information to get to a bad site. No, this is not what happened. I actually had supervision on this. And there's only two things that I think in all the research, and now we're done with the horror, we're in serious mode now. And that is, there's been good research, and most of it has come from Japan, but China is picking it up in terms of the effect of yellow tea on fatty liver or diseased liver. And this has been in the works since about 2016. So there's been study after study. And so there's enough now that I believe it's safe to say that somehow yellow tea interacts with the liver in a favorable way. I think that that's a safe statement. The other thing, and I just told you a lie a minute ago, and the lie was that I'm finished with the horror part. I don't think I'm finished with the horror part, because in the same sentence about health benefits, helps you lose weight. I thought, oh, that's good. I see that almost all the time for tea. The very next set of words increases your appetite. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, helps you lose weight, increases your appetite. This sounds like an unlikely duo. And actually, I think somehow to get them grouped so close together was really an unfortunate thing, because right away it points up something very important. All this research about tea is still kind of in its infancy. So you think about the gut biome and its relationship to the brain and the heart. Our understanding today is so much different than it was 30 years. It's night and day. What I'm thinking about in terms of tea information is we're back 30 years ago. And this is an analogy, by the way. Obviously, I'm not living in two different dimensions. And that as more and more research, particularly out of Asia, comes out about tea, we're going to get more and more useful information about how it might interact successfully with the body. The other thing about yellow tea is we do know there's science around parsing what sort of polyphenols it has. So we talked last week about one of the polyphenols that it has 10 times more than green tea, but almost all the rest, including EGCG, and EGCG being the one that everybody's so excited about with green tea, is less. And instead, it has theorubicins, theaflavins, theobronins, theosinensins. And doesn't it seem great that I'm able to tell you all these more than 8-letter words of scientific names of polyphenols? I think it's pretty great. Oh, except we're missing something. How do these polyphenols bring you benefit? And that's what the scientists are really focused on right now. They even now break down the theaflavins and the theorubicins as yellow theaflavins and yellow theorubicins. This is the first time I've seen that appellation. And so I'm going to keep my eyes open because I know more information is going to come out. And as it's tested better, and as there's verification, particularly internationally, studies come out in China, studies come out in Japan, studies come out here. Those things I'll continue to convey to you because this is a key element that we're all looking for. We love taste and we love mindfulness, and all of those bring a certain type of health to us. But we also want to know what's under the hood, what's driving everything, and how can that personally benefit me? All right. So that was the horror part of the show. Let's move forward. So Standalone comes from a location where most of the tea leaves are grown in the forest. And they are monoclonal, but there are other plants around them. So let's talk about what the soil terroir looks like. In the best places in the forest, it's between 4.5 and 5.5 pH. So it's slightly acidic. You can actually grow tea anywhere in the range from 4.0 up to 6.0. But optimally, 4.5, 5.5. That's your sweet spot. The soil there is not dense, it's loose, it's got many, many nutrients, it's got decaying material in it, plant material from the forest. So the result is this is an environment that tea bushes love. In that set of nutrients, some of the most important, especially the macronutrients, are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Very rich in this area. So what else? How else does the soil look like? Some of it is red. So in the areas in the forest where it's red, you also get a number of trace minerals. And I'll tell you 3 in particular that are especially important for tea plant health: boron, zinc, and iron. Those 3. And they help prevent against pests. They help make a healthy tea plant. So those are micro The macro are the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. I'll tell you what's completely unhelpful and what you don't want in the soil is calcium carbonate. If you have calcium carbonate, tea plants in the soil, that is, tea plants are not going to grow very successfully. So, as a tea scientist, now obviously, 1,000 years ago, the peasants weren't going out and measuring, how much of this and how much of that. But they were looking at color. They were looking at density of soil. Why do I talk about density of soil? Let's step back a minute and ask the following question. Do tea plants prefer moisture or do they prefer humidity? Now, somebody's going to believe, and they're going to indicate this is a trick question, John. And no, I don't mean this to be a trick question. And moisture and humidity are two different things, right? Humidity actually is relevant to how much moisture is in the air. Moisture on the ground is actual water on the ground. Now, in this forest, they prefer the water because the soil is loose, so it drains well. If it's not draining well, the roots would become waterlogged. That's not good. Tea plants die with waterlogged roots. The humidity, they're not so wild about. I'll tell you what. Tea plants, in some ways, like grape plants, have to have some sun. The sun is important because it plays a role in creation of amino acids, as well as a bunch of other things. And so, therefore, rather than just being in a very humid place, give me the sun. And if you give me a little bit hotter, that's okay. I just need some sunlight. So this is all part of the terroir, and it's part of this terroir of this forest. By the way, this is one of the last, in fact, it is the last remaining primeval forest in eastern China. That's where this tea comes from. So let's not get confused because I don't want to hear somebody come in, oh, give me that yellow tea that's ancient tree. No, this is not ancient tree. This is bushes. Some are very old, but it's not ancient. But it comes or it grows in this primeval forest. So that gives you a little bit about the physical terroir. I think I mentioned last week that this whole area is close to where Premier's Choice grows, which is actually not in the forest, it's just outside of the forest. And so the farmers who were doing Premier's Choice have influenced the farmers who do the yellow tea. One of the things that historically you see sometimes, but I question, is that yellow tea was really, that process or that methodology was invented during the Ming Dynasty. In my mind, this is a stretch. I see no evidence to say to you with authority, hey folks, this was really done in the Ming Dynasty. It is true, the Ming Dynasty led to all the new methodologies, including the wheat, cliff teas, and all right, what I really should have said, including the Wulong style of making tea. This is absolutely true. And we have tons of evidence. And since they weren't making tea cakes anymore, remember, 1368, Zhang comes to power, start of the Ming Dynasty, and this old emperor says the first words in his edict, listen and obey. And then the edict says, no more tea cakes. Too hard on the peasants. We want to make their life easier. Well, it's easy when you come in from the top and say, we're going to make changes. You have the soldiers to enforce those changes, which they in fact did because they went to imperial factories and broke up the equipment. That equipment was all broken up by about 1390 because he wasn't kidding around. He wanted life to be easier for the peasants. Was it easier? It probably was easier to a degree. Nonetheless, it was a little bit like prohibition, where, okay, something's eliminated, fill the void. I want variety. I don't want everything the same. I want something interesting. Let's work on some new methodology that isn't cake, but it deals with loose leaf tea. So that very heady period, essentially from 1368 all the way to the end of the Ming Dynasty, which was around 1635 or so, call it the late 1500s, because Ming Dynasty was falling apart by the late 1500s. People were experimenting. So is it possible that a farmer or two already was on their way to yellow tea? I can't say yes, and I can't say no, because I don't have evidence. We have the evidence for the oolong teas. It's in a poem, for God's sakes. We have plenty of good evidence. And we also have documents from temples that talk about a process where, when I look at it, yeah, that looks like oolong tea. But we've not discovered, or certainly I am unaware of documentation that says that yellow tea started then. But I give it the benefit of the doubt because lots of experiments were going on. So whenever it really started, and the date I like to use is not a specific date. I want to give a range. I want to say sometime likely in the 1700s, you had a few farmers developing yellow tea. At one point in Anhui, this probably became semi-popular in the Jinzhai area, the Dabie Mountain area, which is where this tea comes from. Did it spread far and wide across China? The answer is no. This is the least, yellow tea is the least done tea in China. In other words, the product, the yield of yellow tea is less than any other. And for those of you who are paying attention, one of you is going to make a comment and say, the yield of yellow tea is less than others. That was said in a clumsy way. Yellow tea, farmers who do yellow tea are fewer than any other farm. The production is less than 1% of the total Chinese crop. So that gives you a sense. And this week, Jen was in here and talking about yellow tea and tea in general, and suddenly helped me realize, oh my God, I've forgotten to talk about the break in yellow tea, because there was a break in yellow tea. At one point in the 1950s, the Chinese government believed nobody is producing yellow tea. And so by the 1960s, there was some interest. Let's go to old timers who claimed that they did yellow tea. Let's take some notes. By the 1980s, there's actually some farmers that they can say are doing the yellow tea processing. So think about bush management. And oh God, that is not good to say like that. What I mean is the monoclonal bushes. Think about the management of that for tea bushes. When you're doing green tea, historically in Anhui, Usually you didn't let those bushes go to more than 25 years because yield starts to decline. So you rip them out and you rotate the field so you never have a year where you're ripping all the tea out. So you're rotating and you're planting new stuff. Yellow tea probably followed another path where they probably weren't taking the tea bushes out as frequently, but they were still doing it, probably not as frequently. Remember, there's several factors that are different with yellow tea. As a farmer, what's the number one difference for you on a practical day-to-day basis? That difference is you gotta have space. You gotta have processing space because remember, yellow tea, you are in quotes sealing the yellow, which means you have to have enormous space to do that. You have to store it during this process, whether it's a 3-day process, 7-day process, or a 36-hour process. You have to have the space to store and control humidity and temperature. If you don't have that, or if it's not built yet, well, you know what? I think we'll do green tea this year. You're still doing green tea. And so, not that many farmers. It didn't spread across China. Where else do they have yellow tea? Hubei, Hunan, Canton, and very famously, Sichuan. So we've talked about the most famous yellow teas, and we're having one today. Standalone belongs to one of the 3 most famous. Is it absolutely the most famous? No. Junshan needle from Hunan province is absolutely, hands down, the most famous. Also the most expensive, also probably the hardest to make. Secondly, in this list of 3, in Sichuan, Mengya, that's not right. What's the name? Mengding, that's right. Mengding Huangya, which grows and is processed only in Sichuan. And it's a needle. And that thing is famous and it's good. It's really good. And then you come to today's Standalone. And Standalone is famous because they use more than a 24-hour period to actually process it. They use about 3 or 4 days. And they go through a sealing process usually around 4 times. And so this thing is enormously complicated. You need big space. You need to keep track of where you are. Oh, this batch, we've already had 2 sealing in the yellows. Oh, this batch over here, hey, hasn't had a 4th one yet. And at the very end, you bake. Now, we didn't talk about baking last week, so I'm going to start up right there. What temperature do you bake at? And what are you trying to do? Because you've fried and sealed in the yellow and done that 4 times. God, I would think that the leaves are really tired by the time they get to the baking step. Well, the farmer's really tired, that's for sure. The farmer takes these leaves and needs to do one thing. And that one thing is, let's make sure that the water content, the moisture content in the leaf is 5% or less. Because if I'm caught and it's greater than 5%, I'll be censured. That's not a good thing. So they bake it. They bake it anywhere from 120 degrees to 130 degrees, somewhere in that range. And it's a slow bake, right? Because at that temperature, it's not like you're baking a pot. This is baking tea leaves, trying to get that moisture down, moisture down, moisture down. Hey, I feel it. This feels like 5% or less. Now, they do have tools that they can measure it with, but the experienced farmers can feel it. They can see, yeah, this is 5% less. So all the yellow tea, in order to get on market successfully and not mold, goes through a final baking process. Let's review one thing because let's see how I'm doing. Oh yeah, I'm almost out of time. Let's review one thing about the process that I didn't give you precise numbers. When you fry the leaves, initially, after you pick them wither, you fry at around 250 to 350. And you do it for 3 to 5 minutes for this particular area's process for doing yellow tea. And then you take it out, you roll it, and you put it in straw paper. And you put it in there for about an hour or two. Remember, this is different than last week's process. Last week, they did it for 4 to 7 hours. This week's here in this area, they do it for 1 hour. They actually open it up and stir it around a little bit during the process to make sure that it's even in its process. At the end of the hour, they mix it all together, they refry. And they refry at about 150 degrees, so much less. And they refry. The timing on that depends on how the leaf is reacting. It's not all that long though. And then at the second refry, they go through this very long 24 to 36 hour sealing in the yellow process. Sealing in the yellow basically is doing what? It is making sure that the greenness of green tea, that unoxidized green scents that you have, goes away. And instead, you're doing actually an oxidation process. And last week I said, last week's is 7 to 8 or 9% oxidized. This week, it's somewhere between 20 and 30% oxidized. So, with that note, when we come to the tasting, because we have real numbers here, you're probably going to expect that this is going to taste different than last week's. I certainly do. Let's take a 10-second commercial break, and I'll come to that side, and the tea master will brew with you. Okay. There's nothing more pleasing to me than being able to bring forth the numinous. Oh my gosh, wearing something very fancy. Tea master, Bijou. So the process, and again, we have a couple new people. The process is she will brew first, and I'll show you how to get into the quality arena, that is test the tea, and then she will brew again with you. So this first one is a demonstration, the second one we brew together. So without further ado, let me bring up Bijou, tea master.
Thank you. Yeah, so. So how to do how this demonstration Good morning, 早上好 Yeah. So we do yellow tea called 黄茶. Okay. So 黄茶 from the Anhui Jinzai. Yeah, it's famous. Okay, this is my the style, the tea tree, the big glass and the one strainer, and also I have the tea trays. Yeah. Thank you. So just hopefully I prepare.
So this is her tableau. This is her setup. Tea tray to catch the water. We use 3 glasses to get through the dissipation, cooling of the water faster. 2 glasses is enough, and a household strainer. It's very simple. All right, so she's drawing 200-degree water. You can draw any temperature water between 212 and 175. And the purpose is to heat the glasses, make sure everything is absolutely clean and no residue of anything on the glasses. Remember, we're in tea rhythm now. Everything she does and everything you do when it's your turn will be rhythmic. Each of us has our own rhythm, but it's important to establish that rhythm and figure out what it is, because that way you'll repeat the steps every time and you'll have a predictable cup of tea. All right, she's drawing 175-degree water, which she's going to cool down. The rules for this are 170-degree water, 4 grams, 2 minutes. So aerating the water, dissipating the heat, dissipating the steam. Why do we do this? Because over the years, early on and over the years, we've experimented repeatedly with a variety of ways to do these teas. And this we find to be the most successful, most flavorful, and most repeatable. So these rules aren't something we just invent willy-nilly. We test this, and actually, people from China have been at this shop and are always surprised at how good their tea tastes. The tea master doesn't handle the leaves directly. She uses bamboo to hold them, then a bamboo needle to get them into the cup. Set the timer for 2 minutes. And you notice she did a neat trick there. We didn't talk about it, but in today's session, she actually split the glass of water that she was going to use. And this was to help cool it down faster. So again, if you're serving people and you're at a party or you want to do it a little faster, yeah, more glasses, divide the water. That's one way to do it more fast, more quickly. All right. And carefully demonstrating, most of the leaves are at the bottom. Now, that part of what the tea master did, you don't have to do. You don't have to go right up to the very edge. But if you're skilled like she was, you can do that. Nonetheless, that made it a little harder to demonstrate what this looks like. All right. So let's see, I set the timer. I did indeed set the timer. So right away, just like last week, there's going to be some things you detect. And so I remind you to take out your notes from last week, because last week when we tasted Veiled, you all had a really quick, deep understanding of that tea, and you got it right away from the tea leaves, from the aroma. And this is going to be a little bit different understanding. And so that's why it's nice to take these notes and then be able to compare week to week what you're having and what you're sensing about the teas. So this is almost done. I'm not going to launch into another subject here. We have 20 more seconds.
You know, in Yunnan, you've spoken of fruit trees growing amongst some of the, or fruit plants amongst some of the tea trees.
What's growing among
What's
these?
growing amongst these?
Great question. Turns out azaleas are. Lots of azaleas. Oh, and also there are pines. There's a variety of pine that grows in this forest as well. You have flowers for which there's something called masoon or something. I've forgotten. I may not have even said that correctly. There's a flower, and I've never seen it here. But there is no fruit that I'm aware of growing in this forest. And it's really a beautiful forest. It no fruit trees. All right. So, oh my goodness, look at the color of that. This must be yellow tea. Wow. Did you put any pink dye in here? Oh, she nods no. What's that?
I'm just banned now. It's just hard to keep up.
Indeed. Okay, so let's enter the quality arena. So the quality arena, this is done at 170 degrees. So we'll take 170 degrees sip. And what we're doing when we do that is testing or seeing where the astringency is in our mouths. What is the cause of astringency again? It's the polyphenols interacting with the taste buds in our mouths. Actually, interacting with all parts of our mouths. Some of you will have a reaction on the top tip of your tongue, some on the top of the mouth, sides of the mouth. It happens all over. And because I have an interaction in one place doesn't mean that you necessarily got to have an interaction in the same place. We're genomically different. So you will have an interaction where it is. Doesn't much matter. The second thing we're going to look for as I take the sip is the aftertaste, because there will be an aftertaste with this, and you may not detect it right away. So it may take a few sips, and then all of a sudden, oh, yeah, I'm getting an aftertaste. Lastly, I ask you to think about the energetics. So what am I talking about, the energetics? Is it warming? Is it grounding? How is it making you feel? Because that is a measure of all of these teas. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and enter the quality arena. Not in a hurry. Trying to determine where that is stringent. Okay, I get it. I get an aftertaste. Still working on the energetics. I'm going to take a second sip. When I take the second sip, I will also concentrate on aroma as well as taste. And I'll reinforce what I detected on the first sip. And now I'm getting a little bit of energetics. All right, so it's your turn to brew. And you notice I didn't tell you what I got. You'll brew and then you'll tell me what you got, and then we'll talk about it.
Kathy comments, the dry leaves smell sweet and fresh, though the warm leaves take on a deep, almost roasted scent.
Love this comment. Dry leaves, sweet and fresh. They absolutely are sweet and fresh. And that's one of the characteristics that even as you're in this forest, it smells kind of sweet in this forest. It's got a really nice smell. Every forest has its own characteristic smell. And the forests in Isla Mountain, you know, they're beautiful, and you're struck by the mosses and the ferns everywhere. The forests here, you're struck by the density of the forest, and you're also struck by all the streams that are running in the forest, and it just smells good. It smells real good. In terms of the wet leaves, Kathy indicated also in
A deep, almost roasted scent in the
Yeah.
warm leaves.
in a deep, almost roasted scent, and this is something I also detected. So great job.
You've also spoken of in Yunnan, though as a more wild area, of there being incredible creatures who live in the forest. Are there, what's the wildlife like in the area where these tea plants grow?
Oh, that's a great question. So the first thing to know is, if you were stupid, you could die in this forest. And so that means there is one animal in particular that you would not like to encounter. And there are wild boars in this forest. And they warn you, when you enter this forest, be careful and be alert, because those animals, if they charge you, it can be a serious problem. So that, unlike the other forests, which have cobras and, you know, uh, they have large cat predators. That other forest from time to time even has elephants in it. This forest does not. This forest, there are one or two varietals of snakes you don't want to encounter, but by and large, this doesn't have that same sense of danger. Deeper in this forest, you'd find monkeys, but the monkeys aren't near where the tea is growing. All right, so you watched the tea master heat the cups. You notice she put the water back in the kettle and poured from the kettle because the kettle has a spout and you're able to direct so that you don't hit the leaves directly. It's better if you hit the sides of the glass, but if you end up hitting leaves directly, don't stress out about it. There's so many things that we tell you in the beginning. It's like, how am I ever going to enjoy this cup of tea? I have to remember 500 different things. No, that's not what it is. You remember one by one, and over time, you start noticing differences, and it's like, oh, that's what he meant. And then you get to that place of full appreciation. We didn't come upon this. This is something we created ourselves. I mean, we watched what they did in small cups in China and obviously didn't leave the realm of that, but it took a ton of experimentation. Kyle asked a great question yesterday. He said, well, why do you use cups that are so wide? Wouldn't it be better to use uh, double lined cups because it'd be easier to handle? And taste wise, it's just not the same. And the retention of heat is not, this is the thing that's misleading for Westerners, because Westerners are always thinking, ooh, yes, I go to Mordor when I get my tea, and they brew it at 205 degrees. And so hot is the name of the game. That's why you have to have milk and sugar. Um, Here, it's the correct temperature is the name of the game. What does it mean, correct temperature? It's the temperature that maximizes the aroma and the flavor. Timer went off. You're separating the tea leaves from the tea water.
Who drinks this tea in China, and is it gift tea level or?
This is a great question. And I was going to get into this next week, but you know what? Since you've asked the question, I'm going to get into it right now. This particular tea would only really be gift tea to local people because they understand it. It's not gift tea that, for example, in the same way that Dragonwell is gift tea or Scarlet Robe is gift tea, because people just don't understand in China and haven't experienced yellow tea with the intensity that they've experienced in other teas. Next week's tea, however, is a well-known gift tea, and there's a story behind it because it's actually caked and only 1,000 of these cakes were made, and it was specifically designed to be a gift tea. So we'll get into why that gets to the category of gift tea next week. But great question. And in general, if you are a tea aficionado in China and looking for a new experience, you will have found yellow tea. If you drink tea just because you like it and you have your favorite that you drink every day, you're unlikely to have found it, although you will likely have heard of it. Most people in China have heard of yellow tea, although we've had some examples where people have come back from China, Westerners, friends from here, and they say, well, I asked about yellow tea, they didn't know about it. And well, okay. So it's the quantity that's done of this is so little. That's why not everybody really gets a chance.
And Jeremy asked what the original question was, and that to which John was responding, and that was, who drinks this particular yellow tea in China, and is it gift tea level? And so that is what John was talking about, responding to.
Oh, okay. So for the first timers, this is a time when you enter the quality arena and then you give your impressions of what you're tasting or sensing.
Peter says, I didn't note any toasted corn, rice. The smell of the leaves are wet leaves compared to last week's veil. This has nice astringency up front, a light, consistent, even density. But in all honesty, even though I'm not wearing linen, the particular astringency and sweetness reminds me of graciousness and would likely lead me to initially guess that this could be a green tea if I were going in blind and I'd lose any ranking. I have recently achieved, only ranking I have recently achieved. However, I am picking up an internal grounding. I feel my energy wants to remain inside my skin and not necessarily go outwards like a green tea. So maybe I only fall half a rank.
Wow. So it's really hard to comment on that because he had rankings in there. But let me start with the rankings. First off, no drop in rankings at all. Peter reaches into this tea and observes something very interesting. And by the very end, he actually encapsulates how Chinese would talk about this. This is an amazing journey, his comment, because from the humble beginning all the way to the incredible ending, very, very, very good. So he talked about graciousness, which is a high-end green tea, that for him, he detected something that felt like graciousness. But by the end, he talked about this is somehow more mellow. That's exactly what the Chinese would say, that this is mellower than a green tea. In fact, the definition of sealing in the yellow for some Chinese, even in the tea industry, is it's not, it takes away the brightness and instead gives you mellowness. And so green tea is about brightness and activeness. You notice Peter referred to an activeness in terms of energetics, and green tea is typically an activeness. This is more of a calming, more of a grounding. So actually, your ranking improved, Peter. Great comment, because it went across this whole stream of consciousness and ended in a perfect spot. Yes.
Rob says the warm leaves have a sweet malt, an umami round scent. The steeped leaves are sweet, floral, have a hint of boiled bamboo. The tea water feels like a non-salty ocean in my nose, hints of cider and corn husk.
So this is also a great comment because it takes you from warm leaves to wet leaves to the tea water. So the warm leaves, sweet and floral, is that correct?
Warmly sweet and floral.
What-
Yeah, the warm leaves have the sweet malt.
I'm
and
sorry, sweet malt.
Apologies, it's the
Didn't
steep,
get that
steep
right.
leaves have the added florality with a
Okay.
hint of boiled bamboo.
Florality with a hint of boiled bamboo for the
steep
wet leaves,
Yep.
steep leaves.
You got it.
What part of that comment do I particularly like? I particularly like the hints of bamboo because actually one of the things I forgot to mention, and I'm glad that you uh, uh, forced this back up into my consciousness. In this forest, there actually does grow a couple varietals of bamboo. It's not the same bamboo that you get in the Southwest China. Much smaller, but it's bamboo nonetheless. Great comment from that. And how does he talk about the tea water?
The tea water feels like a non-salty ocean in my nose, hints of cider and corn husk.
Hence the what?
With hints of cider and corn husk.
Hints of cider and corn husk. Okay. Wow. And I really like Rob has identified some things that are really good here, particularly the corn husk. He didn't say corn. He didn't say corn silk. He said corn husk, and I catch that. That actually links well to the hints of bamboo in the wet leaves. So yes, I get where you're going with that. The Chinese would not be surprised by that type of comment. Good job.
Jin E comments, absolutely delightful. Very light, delicate scent. It's pleasant with drifting sweet notes that are a touch of honey and fresh wheat kernels. My Kansas farm girl is very happy. Very easy to drink tea, medium to drink this tea, medium clean tea water. I get some mild to medium astringency and energetics show up early, and I'm jumpy after 10 minutes or so of drinking the tea. The flavor is a warmer and more developed version of scent, with the honey fading and the grain flavor becoming more rounded, but still not nearly as toasted as veiled last week. I would drink this all the time.
Great comment, Jen. So she covered a whole range of things. I want to focus on she caught mellow again. She caught this sense of sweetness, a little bit of honey-like, not as roasted. And thank you for comparing it to veiled, because veiled leads with the roast. This does not. If you detect roast at all, it's in the background and it flows through in kind of a mellow way. This is like a grown-up roast versus veiled roast, which just hits you straight off the bat. Also, Jen talks about one other thing, which is really important because she said after about 10 minutes, she feels the energy. So I ask you this, caffeine-wise, compared to green tea, is it going to have more or less? That's a rhetorical question. You don't need to answer. It's going to have less, but not much less. This will have more than what we call red tea, what you call black tea, or Americans call black tea. This will have definitely more than that. So it's in that intermediate slot. This has more than the oolong teas, a lot more than the oolong teas. So it's not surprising, along with the mellow, you feel energy. And it's also not surprising that this is a comforting tea because, again, unlike the green, which usually has, or for many people, has an interaction that is so distinct and so strong that many times, that's a little too much for me. This is not that way. This is mellow. Yeah.
Kathy notes, my first taste impression was that I detected the minerality of a wok.
Now that's a really interesting comment. Kathy detects the minerality of a wok.
Of a oolong tea.
Of an oolong. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I like this comment because remembering in the description of this forest. So actually, what you did is you just pointed where in the forest. You're walking in the forest, you're going through some soil that's, brownish, and then all of a sudden there's a plot over there that's reddish. You picked up the reddish soil where the tea leaves from the reddish soil because that's got those trace elements in it. Great catch.
Jeannie says, it's hard to follow our poets, but I got a gentle chocolate cherry aroma from the warm leaves.
Ah, chocolate cherry aroma from the warm leaves. Again, everything so far very much in balance because that chocolate, I understand what you're referring to. The cherry, others have noted a hint of sweetness, hint of honey, hint of floral, and remembering, especially for those of you who are newer to the broadcast, I don't differentiate. Of course, I understand there's a difference in meaning in words, but what I mean is I don't when people say floral and they say fruity, they're tasting or smelling the same thing. And they're putting different names because we do that. This isn't as defined, as well defined, especially for floral and sweet. And so the result is there's great big crossover. Yeah.
Jonathan asks, of all of the yellow teas at Sophie's, which is your favorite?
Of all the yellow teas at Sophie's, which is my favorite? I think Encore is my favorite. So Encore is a Junshan needle, and that thing is just fabulous. I would say secondarily that probably this one would be my second favorite. They're very, very close, both of them for different reasons. So yeah. All right. So how am I doing? Oh, we're all doing just great.
Peter says, deeper in the cup, the sensations of underside of my tongue are coming to the forefront, and I'm getting a juiciness and an umami.
Juiciness and umami from the underside of Peter's tongue. I like this. And I forgot to mention that when Rob was talking because he referred to umamis several times. And this whole question of umami, by the way, because this has now come up a few times here at the shop, how to define umami. And you see so many different definitions across people who are in the industry. I am not talking about the tea industry, I'm talking about the food industry. And so umami covers a wide range of things. And actually, Jonathan produced a list last week, and on that list was meat, asparagus, seafood, mushrooms. So that's why umami does fit in this context, because particularly in both Rob and Peter's cases, they gave further explanations. So with Rob, hints of bamboo and
like a non-salty ocean.
Oh, that's right, non-salty ocean. So there are all these complex flavors. So let's back up a minute. As soon as you start hearing umami a lot, or at least when I hear umami a lot, then I start realizing, ooh, there's a lot of different flavors here. And then I start really paying attention because knowing that that flavor has such a wide application, that's one of the reasons I can tell people are picking up a variety of things. And I really like the sense of ocean for umami. I like the sense of mushroom for umami, and I like the sense of asparagus for umami. All three of those things I can really understand and really, really relate to. Many of the other things that are listed as umami, I have a harder time connecting with. And so I'm sure all of you are also wrestling with this problem. That's why I'm doing it publicly.
Jeremy comments in the back, small mound of leaves seemed too modest in size, but the brewed tea has a large presence. Golden amber color. The water has a hint of corn silk and fresh veggie aroma, slight astringency on the center of the tongue, and juicy. Warming to the core, brings pleasure.
Oh, great comment. Brings pleasure is the best part of it. Warming to the core, juicy. The juicy part is really what some of you, I think, have been dancing around. Because as you talk about mellow, as you talk about warming, this suggests something you can consume pretty quickly and would consume pretty quickly if we weren't doing a tea class today. Because if you're not present with this tea, it's easy to have it beside you, and a minute later, you pick up the cup. What happened? Somebody must have drunk all my tea. It's that good. Great comment, Jeremy. All right. You know, I stand awed in this land of tea giants, which you represent. Your comments were absolutely great today. Spot on. Next week, one of you has already unwrapped or unraveled part of the lining to what you're going to get next week. Next week is Gold Disc. This is a gift tea, and this was a special circumstance gift tea. So we'll talk about that next week. Your responsibilities this week are to stay healthy. We'll see you next week. Take care now. Bye-bye.